An update now on the Conservative leadership race. While candidates are taking swipes at each other, not surprisingly, they're also taking swipes at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Over the weekend, Peter MacKay's campaign tweeted out a video from his account of the Liberal leader in a yoga pose and listed some costs to the Liberal campaign of yoga lessons and spa bills. It goes on to read, quote, "Liberals can't be trusted." That drew some online backlash. The CBC's Hannah Thibodeau spoke with Peter MacKay today. She joins us now. Hey, Hannah.
Hey,
so you asked Mr. MacKay very specifically about this tweet. What did he say?
Yeah, it was quite interesting because he said he didn't like it. He wasn't happy with the tweet that was on his verified account. So this was something that was put out by his team. Let me just show people again what that tweet was to see if you're unhappy with it as well. In the tweet, he says it crossed the line. The tweet came out this weekend. It shows Justin Trudeau in a yoga pose. He's on a desk and he's holding up his back legs. And in the message, too, it's interesting because it goes on to say that it chastises Trudeau for paying for the cost of the yoga, which is about just over $800. And it was his campaign team that did this for yoga as well as a spa. And the Liberals can't be trusted with other people's money. That's what it says. So MacKay told CBC News this morning that that's not the tone he wants to set for his campaign. So I asked, okay, will you apologize and will you remove the tweet? He said no. Here's why.
Well, it's factual, but I want to keep the tone civilized. I want to keep the tone about solutions. I want to move to a better place and a better discourse. And so for that, I am not happy at the way that was put up on my site. Yeah, I didn't have eyes on that. And, you know, that happens in the early days of a campaign. We're getting our messaging and our communication down. I'm traveling about the country, and we have people on the ground making certain decisions. And so we've tightened that up now to a better approval process.
So he's not removing it, not apologizing for it. And one of the things, too, MacKay has, of course, been in the past criticized for some of his spending as well. One of the ones that I actually asked him about, it's like, how can you put this up if you, in fact, have done this? And I was talking about the time that he took a search and rescue helicopter to get out.
A big controversy.
There was a huge controversy about that spending to get out of Gander, Newfoundland, to catch a flight back for a government announcement. The opposition wanted him to resign for that because it cost I think it was about $16,000 it would have worked out to be. But he defended that again today, saying, look, I was a government minister. I was doing government business using a government piece of transportation. So he did defend that again, but he's sticking with this tweet.
Okay, I have some more questions to ask you about this, but we want to bring in the power panel into the discussion. In Toronto, Melissa Lantsman, National Vice President at Enterprise Canada, joins us. She's next to Brad Levine of Council Public Affairs. Over in Montreal, former Quebec Liberal Cabinet Minister Yolande James, and JP Tasker, who was also just here a moment ago. Hi, everybody. And I just want to follow up with you really quickly because this idea, I found his answer very interesting on, I'm not going to take it down because it's factual, but almost like if there had been a smiley face next to it, the tone would have been better. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he doesn't want to run a negative campaign, it sounds like, from what he told you. Yeah. But at the same time, he's not backing down from direct shots at the Prime Minister.
No, and what was interesting, too, is if you look at the campaign so far, there has been a lot of negativity on Peter MacKay's Twitter site, also Erin O'Toole, the Ontario MP, who's also running to become the next Conservative leader. Not just at each other either, it's at the Prime Minister as well. And what we're hearing from a lot of Conservatives at this point is that's not the tone they want to set, because they tried that tone in the 2019 election campaign. It didn't work for them. So a lot of people I talked to behind the scenes, and maybe we can hear from some of them, is that instead engage in conversation, policies, and ideas to get that greater number of voters in the next election campaign.
Here's my devil's advocate question for you, Melissa. Maybe it didn't work in the general election, but might it work with the Conservative membership who are ultimately going to be picking the leader?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point that leadership elections are very, very different than general elections. There's really two things happening here. One, I think members want to see that there is somebody that can stand up to Justin Trudeau. I'm not sure if this is necessarily the way to do it or the right
by making
tone.
Fun of yoga.
but at the same time, I think that if you look across the board at all of the social media and you know these members and these two people, Peter MacKay and Erin O'Toole, they're both a lot smarter than their Twitter Twitter suggests that they are, and their voice just isn't captured by the people doing the social media. So early days of a campaign, and I think that will change, and we'll be having a really different discussion, hopefully, about policy in the next 2 months.
Brad, what do you think? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it's a generous one. I don't know if it's fair, but it's generous. I mean, look, leadership, the minute you have that assignment that you give a staff person, power over the Twitter handle, there has to be it shouldn't take 2 weeks to get the policy of what goes out and what tone it is to go out, because that Twitter handle is the calling card for the Peter MacKay leadership campaign in more places that Twitter reaches than the candidate himself. There are so many reasons to go after Justin Trudeau from the Conservative angle, but this misses the mark wholly. And I think he's going to have to actually do some backpedaling, Mr. MacKay will, because it was so off tone. The primary
kind of did, though, right? Like he's saying, I didn't have eyes on it. He wasn't supportive of the tone.
Fair enough, and I accept his reasons for that. But still, he's in charge of his campaign, and there's a fundamental difference, as Melissa says, between the primary and the general election. You're going after a different audience to become the leader of a party versus trying to become Prime Minister of the country. Those are two separate audiences. But at the same time, you can't have your brand during the primary race or the leadership race, which is now. Sully your brand so that when it comes time for the general, people tune you out because you were so tone deaf on trying to attack and differentiate yourself from Justin Trudeau.
Just
Hannah
one
wants
thing
to get
I
back
want
in,
to
and I'll
jump
get
in
you
on there.
your
It's
line.
like
Yeah.
you're
I'll get
talking
you in a
about
second, Yolanda.
you're talking about the primary, so the leadership race, as opposed to the general election. But if you look at this tweet had nearly 700,000 views. Yeah. So that's not just the membership, because the membership is about 160,000.
Yolande, what do you think? I mean, to the point of, yes, he's walking it back. The thing that interests me is that he's walking it back. He's acknowledging, Mr. MacKay is acknowledging that this isn't the tone that he wants to convey. But at the same time, he's saying, I'm not going to take it down.
I mean, I almost would have preferred that he would stick by his tweet than what he did in terms of response, honestly, even though just to be clear, I think it's completely distasteful and off the mark, as Melissa and Brad pointed to. But this whole thing of going to say it's not the right tone, but it's factual. It's like, come decide. You can't say one thing and then just keep it up there. I just find that it just, in my view, just points to the fact that he wants to play to a certain base of the membership of the party at this point, as you were talking to earlier. Vashti, just keep in mind, as everybody knows, that it's a short campaign, so bringing in a lot of new membership is more difficult. I just don't understand why he feels that it's necessary. We're no longer in the scenario where we have all of these different potential candidates coming in. He's clearly, from what we're seeing in pollings, ahead of those that are way ahead of the others.
Way ahead of
so I don't know. Maybe it's because he wants to shake off the talk that was on early on as a former progressive conservative leader, that he was going to try to move the party in a more progressive way. So then obviously continually blasting or criticizing Justin Trudeau among the base of the Conservative Party is very popular. Coming right out, we didn't talk about that, the fact that he doesn't want to have no carbon tax under his leadership with no other context there. I think that too is a part of a strategy of being able to reassure the current base of members voting for the leader that, hey, don't be too worried about me trying to move the party. But short-term gain, I think that would be a long-term loss, because if they want to, as many Conservatives recognize, win the election, they're going to have to have a change of strategy for sure.
I'm just torn on this because, like Hannah, Conservatives say, lots of Conservatives I speak with are like, this is, we can't be obsessed with Justin Trudeau. At the same time, look at the fundraising numbers from last year, right? They every time they launch an attack like this, it's successful for them in raising money, and they also got more of their base out in the last election. They didn't get more of the general electorate out, but they got a lot of Conservatives out.
Yeah, well, and let me just pick apart this tweet for a second. He's saying that, he's blaming the staff for the age-old excuse for, I didn't mean to do it. It was
didn't have eyes on it. He told
he didn't have
right?
eyes on it.
Yeah, but he's encouraged and perpetuated this discussion about Trudeau's physicality and they're basically trying to emasculate him, right? This is not the first time. I mean, Peter MacKay himself has done it twice before. He did it with Brian Lilley at Sun News the day he announced his campaign. He said, he does yoga, I do hockey. So trying to compare, trying to minimize the Prime Minister.
He addressed
and his
that
physicality.
with me today quickly.
Well,
he said that he was just
one.
stating a fact, yeah.
Well, and then he said the same thing with John Iveson of the National Post. He said, I'd rather fight him UFC rules or on the ice, no headgear, no gloves. And he was talking about when the Prime Minister was engaged in that boxing tournament with Patrick Brazeau. So Peter MacKay is obviously willing to go there and discuss the physicality of the Prime Minister and his femininity, I guess. Well, it's probably trying to undermine the Prime Minister and make him look weak and not as hardy of a man, I guess, as Peter MacKay is. I don't know.
All right.
So we jumped
go
down.
for it, Melissa. Then I got to take a break.
We actually jumped down the politicians' throat for doubling down, and then we jumped down their throats also
The
for
bottom line is
for
politicians
walking
can't
something
win.
back.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think that this race and the narrative in this race has not been driven by policy, has not been driven by what Conservatives need to be talking about. It's been driven by sort of tweets on social media, who's going to walk in which pride parade, and who can speak French well. And in order for the Conservatives to be successful, they've got to move past this and what we're talking about.
Policy out. Rick Peterson's the only one who has so far.
Walk it back.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.